Hello again, everyone, and welcome to our 200th episode of the Nitro Corner. I'm Paul the Nitro Skivers. Glad that you could be able to join us here on our 200th episode. First and foremost, I want to thank each and every one of you on YouTube for tuning in each and every week on the Nitro Corner. Today I want to do something special for you fans. I'm going to do sort of like a shoot Q&A about myself and about certain subjects in professional wrestling, and then I'm going to answer a fan's question that was sent in to me. Unfortunately, there was only one. A little disappointing here, but I'll take what I can get, and hopefully you'll be able to enjoy this shoot style Q&A here on the 200th episode of the Nitro Corner. So let's begin. My name is Paul Skivers, aka Paul the Nitro Skivers. You know that already. I started out as a wrestling fan the week after Thanksgiving of 1985. I was tuning through the television set trying to look for an alleged Mr. T cartoon series that was supposed to start that. Excuse me, a little cough there. That was supposed to have started that weekend, and then I tuned into WPHL TV 17 in Philadelphia. That's what the announcer always says, Philadelphia. And I tuned in at 2 p.m. that Saturday afternoon for NWA Worldwide Wrestling. I tuned in there for like the first 5 minutes, and I saw the then United States Heavyweight Champion Magnum TA wrestle a preliminary opponent. I think it was George South, I do believe. Anyway, I was just enthralled by the sheer action, the excitement of it all, and I got hooked immediately to professional wrestling. That was way back then in 1985 when I was in 5th grade at William Henry Middle School in Dover, Delaware. Great memories. After that, I started watching wrestling. Mostly it was the NWA. I didn't even know that the World Wrestling Federation even existed until April of 1986, when I turned on to WTXF TV 29 out of Philadelphia. Excuse me. I have a little cough again, excuse me. Out of Philadelphia at around 11 o'clock on Saturday mornings. And I saw WWF Wrestling Challenge with the late, great Gorilla Monsoon, and of course, the one and the only, the man himself, Bobby, the brain-eating, brilliant comedic genius he is. And there was that was the first time I ever watched the World Wrestling Federation. I didn't even know who Hulk Hogan was at that time. I thought the NWA was the only wrestling organization out there, and then I figured it out. There were so many other wrestling territories out there, and it was an exciting time to be a wrestling fan. Which leads me to my first live event that I've ever seen. It was on July 29th, 1986 at the Delaware State Fair in Harrington, Delaware. On that particular night, it was the National Wrestling Federation, first ever wrestling card, by the way, at the Delaware State Fair in its history. And on that night, the main event was a 15-foot-high steel cage battle between the Mercenary of Mayhem, the legendary hardcore Bruiser Brody, against the madman from the Sudan, Abdullah the Butcher. This was hardcore at its best. These two men carved each other up using the cage, using whatever methods. Excuse me there. I have to drink my Pepsi here. Using whatever techniques they had and any other dirty tricks they knew. Eventually, Bruiser Brody was knocked out of the cage and won the cage match. But that wasn't the end of it. They continued the brawl. I was like 5th row, ringside, and there goes Brody and the Butcher. They were battling. I was like 30 feet away from it. I was like, yeah, get him, Brody. Get Abdullah. Get him. And being scared half to death when I do it comes my way, I went the other way. Trust me, anyone's seen Abdullah the Butcher live? Excuse me there. Went the other way, and believe me, if you catch Abdullah the Butcher, you'd be running the other way in fear. And that was the early portion of my start as a wrestling fan. Moving on now, what was the best live event that I've ever seen? Well, I would have to say it's kind of a tie between three of them. First, one CW's Hearts and Headlocks 2 was tremendous, as over 673 people jam-packed the Smyrna Boys and Girls Club to see Jerry the King Lawler try to win the one CW title from Christian York. That was one of the best ones. Then there was January 29th, 1994. Actually, I correct myself there. January 13th, 1994. I remember that because it was like 2 weeks before the Royal Rumble of 1994. In the main event, it was Bret the Hitman Hart defeating Erwin R. Shyster in 4 minutes. 4 minutes. I paid $35 ringside seats to see this, and now they give me a 4-minute main event. Excuse me. Gave me a 4-minute main event. Really? I was a little disappointed by that, but Bret Hart did win. Saw a great casket match where Diesel lost to The Undertaker. Had to be taken to the hospital that night. Suffered 10 stitches, I believe. Had to get stitches at Kent General Hospital, and it was on the front cover of the Delaware State News the next day. The third live event that I liked was the first time ECW came to Delaware. It was at the Caesar Rodney High School gym back on April 11th, I do believe, 1995, where I saw Terry Funk and Cactus Jack for the first time. Those two tore the house down. And it was my first introduction to ECW, and I thought I was hooked there. I was looking for the television show. It would take me about 2 years to find ECW when it became available on our cable system. So those are my 3 favorite live events. Now, what was the worst live event I've ever seen? Well, there was a time at the Holy Cross Elementary School gym, June 6th, 1993. This was the week before I graduated from high school, and I don't know the name of the promotion, but that turned out to be the absolute worst suck fest I've ever seen in my entire life. Let me give you just a small example of how it sucked that bad. The main event was a battle royal. Normally in a battle royal, you get thrown over the top rope onto the floor, you get eliminated. But oh no, this is Holy Cross Elementary School. No, if you get thrown through the ropes or underneath the ropes onto the floor, you get eliminated. This is why wrestling has not returned to the Holy Cross Elementary School gym. That was the absolute worst suckfest live event I've ever seen in my entire life. Now moving on sort of into the television realm. The best pay-per-view I've ever seen, let's see here. I think ECW's Barely Legal was the best one I've seen, along with WrestleMania 3 with Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant. This past year's WrestleMania was pretty good with the end of an era with Triple H and The Undertaker and, of course, The Rock, John Cena. But I hate to say this, but it pales in comparison to WrestleMania 3 with Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant, and then, of course, Ricky Steamboat and the Macho Man Randy Savage, and 93,000 people. You can't go wrong on that. So ECW's Barely Legal, and, of course, WrestleMania 3, still some of the best pay-per-views I've ever seen. Oh, let me throw in the Great American Bash 89 on pay-per-view. Tremendous. Top to bottom, all action, all day long. Now, what was the worst pay-per-view I've ever seen? What made me think, why did I put down 1995 for that stuff? Well, here's the answer. January 20th, 2001. There was a promotion called WOW. Excuse me there, right? Of course, I normally am a Coca-Cola drinker, but I'm drinking Pepsi today. Excuse me there. The worst pay-per-view I've ever seen was, wow, January 20th, 2001. Women of Wrestling was a promotion ran by David McLean, famous for the original Gorgeous Ladies of Wrestling. And they had their WOW pay-per-view called WOW Unleashed. They should have kept it on a leash. Every match had a bad, botched ending with half-assed maneuvers, and you knew it was screwed up. Everything didn't make sense, especially in the main event in a cage match between Bambi and Peggy Lee Leather. I forget what their characters' names were, and I couldn't really give a rat's ass about who the characters were in that one, but it was Bambi beating Peggy Lee Leather in a cage match, and I feel sorry for them for competing in the absolute worst pay-per-view. Why did I put down 1995 for that pay-per-view of all time? That's some of my thoughts on that. And now it's on to our question. I asked you fans to submit your questions to me for the 200th episode. A little disappointing, but I'll take whatever I can get. And I have a fan, Jeff Kivett, known as the Jazz Man. Jazz, how you doing there? Welcome to the Nitro Corner. He has 4 questions that he wanted to answer, so here we go. First question from Jeff, the Jazz Man Kivett of Dover, Delaware. Who is and was your favorite wrestler of all time? Who was or is my favorite wrestler of all time? Well, in hindsight, I would have to say the living legend. No, not Larry Sabisco. Larry took that moniker after Bruno retired, but the living legend, Bruno Sammartino. He had class, he had style, he made event Madison Square Garden 211 times. He defeated Buddy Rogers in 47 seconds. 47 seconds? That's just about as impressive as Sheamus defeating Daniel Bryan in 19 seconds at this year's WrestleMania. So I would have to say the living legend of professional wrestling, a man that should be in the WWE Hall of Fame, but he probably never will, the living legend, Bruno Sammartino. Some of my other favorite wrestlers of all time, besides Bruno, would have to be Jack Briscoe, former NWA World Heavyweight Champion, Harley Race, Ric Flair, Dusty Rhodes, Superstar Billy Graham, and Bob Backlund would be some of my personal favorites of all time. Question number 2 from Jeff, the Jazzman Kivett of Dover, Delaware, who I forgot to mention was his birthday. I think it was either yesterday or the day before. Happy birthday to the Jazzman, Jeff Kivett. Question number 2, who is or was the best wrestler of all time? Well, that's a totally different category, Jazzman. You'll have to look at the criteria, the championships he's won, how much of an influence he's had on the business of professional wrestling, how his wrestling ability does against the all-time greats. Well, who is or was the best wrestler of all time? Well, I'm still going to have to say Lou Thesz would be on that list, Bruno Sammartino would be on that list, Vern Gagne would be on that list, Jack Briscoe, Harley Race would be also on that list, Ric Flair would also be on that list of all-time greats. So that was also an interesting question. Moving on to part 3 of Jeff Jazzman Kivett's question. Who has the best catchphrases? That's an interesting point. You have, of course, The Rock. If you smell what The Rock is cooking. Ric Flair, to beat a man, you gotta beat the man, and woo! Excuse there. Then you got Chris Jericho. I'm the best in the world at what I do. But I would have to say that the best catchphrases I've heard is kind of a tie between the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes, and superstar Billy Graham. Dusty Rhodes, the man of the hour, the Tower of Power, too sweet to be sour, was originally started by superstar Billy Graham. But Dusty Rhodes mimics superstar Billy Graham in his style of promo work. Of course, one of the catchphrases I liked was, he dined with kings and queens, but yet he slept in alleys and dined on pork and beans. Hey, we all been there, and it's so relatable. So, no offense to The Rock or Ric Flair or Mick Foley, have a nice day, but really the best catchphrases I've heard were from the superstar himself, Billy Graham, the Tower of Power, too sweet to be sour, just like myself, and the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes, in public, if you will. And now the final part of the question sent in by Jeff, the Jazzman Kivett of Dover, Delaware. What was the greatest match of all time? Well, there were several of them. You can't just name one because there are plenty of great matches of all time. I'll give you a few of them. Some of my personal favorites. One was at Shea Stadium, September 30th, 1972, when Bruno Sammartino and Pedro Morales fought for the Worldwide Wrestling Federation title. Yes, they did meet. It was the only time they met. They wrestled to the curfew, which was a 76-minute match. You have the now infamous Texas Death Match from 1964 that went 1 hour and 27 minutes between Iron Ted DiBiase's dad, Iron Mike DiBiase, and Dory Funk Sr., the father of Dory Funk Jr. and Terry Funk. Terry Funk defeating Jack Briscoe in Miami Beach, Florida for the NWA World Heavyweight title was one of the greatest matches I've seen. Any match involving Dory Funk Jr. versus Jack Briscoe. I can pinpoint the one in Japan, May 27th, I do believe, of 1972. Starrcade 83 is another great main event with Ric Flair versus Harley Race inside the cage, Thanksgiving night, 1983. Hogan versus Andre, of course. The Shea Stadium one, as well as the WrestleMania 3 matchup. There were some of those are my opinion. Of course, another would be Ric Flair versus Dusty Rhodes, July 27th, 1986, Greensboro, North Carolina, in the cage for the NWA World Heavyweight title during the Great American Bash 86. Those are some of the greatest matches of all time, in my opinion. Excuse me there. So hopefully I've been able to answer your question. Jeff, the Jazzman Kivett of Dover, Delaware. Thanks for sending in your question, and thanks for tuning in to the Nitro Corner. And so I've answered all the questions I'm going to answer for this shoot style. I'll be doing this again in the near future. And I want to take this time before we finish to say thank you to each and every one of you YouTube subscribers and fans of YouTube that tuned into my show. 200, I made it 200, and I'm going to make it through another 800 to make it 1,000. That's right, Raw. You heard me, Raw. Monday Night Raw. I'm going to beat your record myself if I have to. Kind of lofty goal to achieve, but what the heck, you know. And thank you very much for tuning in each and every week on the Nitro Corner. Well, that's it for this special 200th episode of the Nitro Corner. Hope you enjoyed that as much as I have. My name is Paul the Nitro Skywers, and I give a toast to number 200. And let's go for 1,000. Until next week, I'm Paul the Nitro Skywers, saying so long, everybody.